Dying young is not just about the physical toll. It's about the emotional struggle, the resistance, and the sheer weight of unfinished dreams. Unlike elderly individuals whose bodies are naturally winding down, young people often have strong, healthy organs even when they're terminally ill. Their hearts keep beating strong, their lungs keep pulling in air, their kidneys keep filtering, despite the fact that one system in their body is shutting down. This makes the process longer, sometimes more painful, and emotionally excruciating for both the patient and their loved ones. Dr. Kalman Kafetz, a hospice doctor, has spoken about this stark contrast. He describes cases where young patients diagnosed with terminal illnesses, often aggressive cancers or degenerative neurological diseases, linger in a state of physical suffering for weeks, sometimes months. Their bodies are fighting to stay alive, even when the disease has made it clear that time is running out. A retired hospice nurse, whose name we can't mention here, messaged us and told us about the last days of a young woman named Rachel. A 29-year-old diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer had always been a fighter. She had a career she loved, a fiancé she was supposed to marry, and dreams she hadn't yet lived. But the cancer was ruthless. Despite being placed in hospice care, her body wouldn't let go easily. Her heart, liver, and lungs were still functioning at nearly full capacity, despite the cancer eating away at her. It wasn't until the very final days that her organs began to fail, and even then, the process took over a week. Her family sat by her side, watching her struggle, not knowing how to help. This is one of the hardest aspects of younger individuals in hospice: the prolonged suffering. The body's resilience, while remarkable in normal circumstances, becomes a double-edged sword when facing terminal illness. It's why hospice teams work tirelessly to manage symptoms, keeping patients as comfortable as possible while families struggle to make peace with the slow, often agonizing decline. In contrast, elderly individuals typically experience a more gradual process of dying. Their bodies have already been through decades of wear and tear, and when the end comes, it often unfolds in a more predictable manner. Instead of one strong, resistant system failing, multiple organs slowly begin to shut down. The body transitions into a natural state of decline, making the dying process feel less abrupt and, in some cases, more peaceful. Dr. Kalman Kafetz explains that elderly patients often experience what he calls a natural winding down. Their bodies, already fragile from age and pre-existing conditions, go through a series of small failures, one organ after another, until the body finally lets go. Unlike younger patients who fight with every breath, elderly individuals tend to slip away more gently. Mr. Harris, an 89-year-old man in hospice care for congestive heart failure. Unlike Rachel, his decline wasn't a battle. It was a slow, inevitable process. His appetite decreased over several weeks, his energy faded, and he began sleeping more. Eventually, his body reached a point where it no longer needed food or water. His breathing became shallow, his heart rate slowed, and he passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his family. The hospice nurse who had been with him for months described it as one of the most peaceful transitions she had ever witnessed. This is a common experience among elderly hospice patients. While there are still challenges, such as managing chronic pain and ensuring comfort, the body itself is usually more prepared to let go. The emotional aspect is different too. Families often have more time to prepare, and the acceptance of death tends to be higher than when a young person is dying. One of the most distressing things for families is watching a young person struggle with pain, difficulty breathing, or neurological symptoms like seizures and confusion. In some cases, young patients experience what's called terminal restlessness, an agitated state where they are unable to get comfortable, leading to distress for both the patient and their loved ones. Managing these symptoms requires a high level of medical intervention, including sedation, pain relief, and emotional support. Hospice nurse Bronnie Ware recalls a patient named Jason, a 35-year-old with glioblastoma, a particularly aggressive brain cancer. Jason's final days were difficult. His breathing became erratic, he experienced frequent seizures, and he was unable to communicate clearly. His family felt helpless, watching him suffer. The hospice team worked tirelessly to ease his pain, using high doses of morphine and sedatives to keep him comfortable. Even so, his mother later described those final days as the hardest thing she had ever witnessed. Elderly patients, on the other hand, often experience fewer dramatic symptoms, but more complications from chronic conditions. Their bodies don't necessarily fight in the same way that a younger person's does, but they still require careful symptom management. Dr. Kalman Kafetz explains that one of the biggest challenges with elderly patients is managing multiple illnesses at once. An elderly patient may have heart disease, kidney failure, and dementia all at the same time, making it difficult to pinpoint the exact cause of discomfort. Instead of one dramatic symptom taking over, there is a slow and steady progression toward the end. A hospice nurse named Linda shared the story of Mrs. Thompson, a 92-year-old woman with Alzheimer's. Unlike Jason, whose final days were filled with intense symptoms, Mrs. Thompson's decline was quiet and gradual. She simply began to eat less, speak less, and eventually sleep more. Her family didn't witness any dramatic changes, just a slow, natural fading away. While they still felt the pain of loss, there was a sense of peace, knowing she was not suffering in the way a younger person might. Emotional and psychological differences. Acceptance and awareness. Younger individuals often struggle with accepting their fate, as their death feels untimely and unfair. Many go through intense emotional battles, feeling frustration, anger, and grief over lost opportunities. Hospice nurse Bronnie Ware recounts how young patients frequently express regrets about the life they won't get to live and the dreams left unfulfilled. Elderly individuals tend to have a greater sense of acceptance. Many have witnessed the passing of peers and loved ones, making death feel like a natural conclusion rather than an abrupt loss. Dr. Lucy Pollock emphasizes that open discussions about end-of-life preferences help both patients and their families navigate the final chapter with peace and dignity. Coping mechanisms and support for families. The emotional toll of watching a loved one die, whether young or old, is immense. However, the way families cope with the process varies depending on the age of the patient and the circumstances surrounding their decline. For families of younger patients, grief, trauma, and the search for meaning. Losing a young person is often described as unnatural, an interruption of what was supposed to be a full life. This makes grief more complicated. Families may struggle with feelings of injustice, anger, and deep sorrow, often questioning why their loved one had to suffer. Hospice professionals recognize that parents, siblings, and partners of younger patients often need additional emotional support. Counseling, grief support groups, and even spiritual guidance play a crucial role in helping them navigate this traumatic experience. Hospice social worker Emily Hartley recalls a mother who lost her 26-year-old son to leukemia. She wasn't just grieving the loss of her son, she was grieving the life he didn't get to live. The wedding that wouldn't happen, the children he'd never have, the career he was just starting. It's a different kind of grief, one filled with so many what could have beens. To help families cope, many hospice programs provide legacy-building activities, such as recording messages, writing letters for future milestones, or creating memory books. These small acts allow families to hold on to their loved one's presence in some way, even after they're gone. For families of elderly patients, acceptance, reflection, and closure. When an elderly individual nears the end of life, the grief is still profound, but there is often a greater sense of acceptance. Their families may have had years to prepare, and many elderly individuals have already expressed their end-of-life wishes. This period is often marked by reflection, sharing memories, expressing gratitude, and making peace with the inevitable. While there is still sadness, there is also a sense of closure that isn't always present when a young person dies. Hospice nurse Linda shares how one family handled their father's passing. They sat around his bed, telling stories, playing his favorite music, and holding his hand. They weren't panicked. They weren't fighting to fix him. They knew it was time, and they just made sure he wasn't alone. For elderly patients, hospice care often focuses on comfort and dignity. Many families find solace in knowing that their loved one's final moments were peaceful and in accordance with their wishes. Regardless of age, hospice and palliative care teams play a critical role in managing the dying process. Their primary goal is to ease suffering, ensure dignity, and provide emotional and spiritual support for both the patient and their loved ones. For younger patients, this often means aggressive symptom management, as their bodies tend to hold on longer. Pain relief, sedation, and emotional support are key aspects of care. For elderly patients, hospice focuses more on a gradual transition, managing chronic conditions and helping the family prepare for the final moments. Spiritual care is another essential component of hospice services. Whether through religious guidance, meditation, or simply being present, hospice chaplains and counselors help patients and families find peace in the midst of uncertainty. While death is a universal experience, the process is deeply personal and varies significantly based on age, health condition, and individual circumstances. Younger individuals often face a prolonged, physically intense dying process, while elderly individuals tend to experience a more gradual decline. For families, the emotional journey is different, but equally challenging. The loss of a young person brings profound grief and a sense of lost potential, while the passing of an elderly loved one, though still painful, is often met with greater acceptance and reflection. No matter the age, hospice care plays a vital role in ensuring that death is met with as much comfort, dignity, and support as possible. In the end, the goal is the same: to honor the individual's life and help their loved ones navigate the journey of saying goodbye.